What qualifies as a first-generation professional? Is it someone who is also a first-generation student? Is it someone in a managerial or upper role? What constitutes that? I was asked this recently by someone who was the first in their family to go to college, made it all the way up to the executive level while their parents were still blue-collar. They felt like people are trying to cling on to the term and they don't understand what it means, and it's watering it down. And I was not a first-generation college student. My father was, and I talk about that in my book on the unwritten rules of work for the working class and neurodivergence. And that is a privilege. And I think the reason this is coming up and why so many people identify with the term is, yes, there's part of the American ideology of bootstrapping, and that you want to feel like you deserve what you have, and you don't want to acknowledge privilege. But there is also, and I talk about this in my book as well, there is also the fact that corporate culture was never made for more than a very narrow group of people. Schools and workplaces in the US only allowed paid work among white men, and there were still big class differences there. White men who were working class were really only explicitly given property and the right to vote to establish racism against black people so that they wouldn't overthrow the wealthy elites by collaborating with black folk. And yes, all of the wealthy elites were white dudes. And when you have a system that is built on that, and while laws have changed and are changing again, where doors have been forced open, but the rules never changed, and they were never written down until I wrote them down. And that is how there has been so much gatekeeping, even with very much needed legislative progression. And so I can sense the frustration with the term, if you are the first in your family to be a first-gen student and first-gen professional, and you've made it that high up, to hear someone else say, like, I do think it's kind of gross when people are like, oh, I'm a first-gen Ph.D. Like, people say that about me, and I'm like, yes, I am the first in my family to get a Ph.D., but while that is a completely different ballgame, and my family had no concept of what that was, it's still different from being a first-gen undergrad. But I think it is telling, and I talk about this in my book, that I think about 90% of people across race, gender, and middle class and below are not happy at work, not happy with things are running, but we're not all attributing it to the same reasons, and so we're not uniting on how to make it better. And so that is definitely part of the goal of my book, is to get us thinking about that. Because if it doesn't work for most of us, and I talk about this, I answer in the introduction, I have a few questions that I go ahead and answer that I'm like, we got to already address this before you get deep in the book. And something I hear a lot is, well, shouldn't the majority in charge set the rules, and like we just have to abide by what the majority wants? One, no, I don't already agree with that mindset, but two, we are not following the majority's rules. The majority are not this insanely wealthy. We are following a very small group's rules, and to varying degrees it impacts everyone else, some way more than others, but I still think most of us aren't happy with it. Links in bio if you want to check out the ebook version. I'm still waiting on the print version, probably post the holiday rush.